of like a popular name.
Club name? Kiera Live!
Yeah, it does sound kind of like a stripper name more than my name even does. So I don't know.
Yeah, I never got confused about your name. I was like, Kiera. Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Must be an American thing.
I guess, yeah. Everyone wants to put an E in it. Because of my arch nemesis, Naomi.
Well, my sister's name is Petra, but it's spelled in the European way, so P-E-T-R-A, so people just call her Petra.
Oh, yeah.
That's her name.
Oh, man. Yeah, names, they're rough. I wonder if he was just coming back. Can see this early. Should we?
Try to get ODS to do stuff. You think it'd be...
What is this?
ODS is like a free program.
Podcast.
And technically, whenever we're doing the screen, yes, select it and drag it, put it on your Twitch overlay, then I bet
Yeah.
if you could make it pop out, then it would be easier. Yeah, but I can't do that. I can just make it full screen.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Maybe this is the worst.
Oh well, it's just the first time, right?
Yeah,
And we have to build demand.
I'm not worried about it.
It's like when you go see a band and it's supposed to start at 7, right?
Yeah, and they keep doing the mic check.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. Endless mic check.
Yeah.
Oh, what was that?
He says it's almost working in the chat.
Oh!
So that's good.
Oh my god.
Almost working.
It's weird because my little Discord icon.
Couldn't have my mic in video.
What the fuck?
Some of you guys should tweet about this. What do we tweet? Technical difficulties.
Cyber glitches.
Yeah. Ironically, we're in Glitch City.
Glitch City. Oh.
Hype. Yeah, hype. Poor Hamish.
It's like so close.
Oh, I made my own keybind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sure.
Oh no.
Oh.
Oh, I can't hear it. What is it? Ah! I need to know. Okay, I'm going there. That's probably fine.
You can hear what? Oh, that's good. Hi, everybody.
Just our voices, or
Yeah.
cool.
That's good. I am
We're in
happy
the
to be
stream.
here.
Sure.
Hello. Kira, talk.
I don't know what to talk about on the spot now. I mean, we were just complaining a lot. Are we ready?
Sure.
Oh, we were just complaining a lot about Mute, the cyberpunk thing that was on Netflix recently, and how terrible it is.
It
Which-
is terrible.
I think Fraser has seen it. So this is starting on a down note. Maybe it's too punk for the cyberpunk chat.
It was very pretty. You could say that.
It's true. It's true. Should we just do intros and, without Hamish? Or
I think that I might have fixed my audio issues by demuting my microphone. If you could see the face that I'm making at myself right now.
No.
Can you guys hear me?
This is so ironic.
I know, this is the best.
It's perfect. It's
Okay, so apparently audio is now working.
You're also way louder than everyone else.
I am way louder than everyone else. Let me turn down my
That's okay. So we're all here because we love cyberpunk, and we've written games that have to do with cyberpunk things. And oh, he needed to. Yeah, we just kind of wanted to chat together, and we thought it would be cool to share that chat with everyone because we're just like huge cyberpunk nerds. So I guess the intro. I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
This is Hamish's channel. But I'm Kira Magrann, and I'm a queer cyborg game designer, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. And we'll go around over to Fraser.
Sure. I'm Fraser Simons. I designed the Veil and Cascade. Currently working on Hack the Planet, and I blog about cyberpunk at consumingcyberpunk.com. And how about Banana Chan? Banana Chan.
I'm Banana Chan, and I write like weird RPGs and LARPs, and I'm also the owner of Game and a Curry, and we make board games and card games. And
Cool.
on to you, Phil.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Vecchione. I am podcaster, game designer, blogger. I wrote Rocker Boys and Vending Machines, the tongue-in-cheek cyberpunk game, and I'm currently working on a game called IntroHACker Operatives.
Oh, that sounds cool.
I've played it. It's good.
And I guess that means me, the swirly symbol in the top left corner.
Yes.
Who,
I feel like it's appropriate.
Yes, is the technical genius who cannot get the technology on his Twitch stream to work. If anyone has thoughts on how to get OBS to work with Discord correctly, then hit me up in some other form. I guess not right now because I won't have time to integrate it. Hit me up before we next come on. The music that you heard in the intro was by Drummer Boy, who is on Twitch and Twitter and Spotify and Apple Music and stuff. And I just like got that track off him less than an hour ago. It is fresh as fuck.
Nice.
All right, Cyberpunk. Oh, I
Fresh
wrote
as
the
fuck.
scroll, but you probably don't know that.
Cool. Awesome. Sorry, did you? Is your mic working okay, Hamish? Or
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Sorry.
can
Banana
see-
Chan's mic is very quiet, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, is this better?
A little bit.
No.
Can you
A
turn
little
up?
bit.
Can you turn up your microphone volume or
better.
something? Yeah, I don't know.
It's about the same.
I think that's a little better.
Damn it. Oh, is it really?
But now you're roboting out though.
That is appropriate.
Okay. You can fiddle with your mic. We'll go through. I think we were gonna talk about our favorite cyberpunk properties, right? So like any kind of media, you know, dead paper or digital or movies or whatever. And I think that I can't pick just one. I'm sorry. My two are Ghost in the Shell because I love Major Kusanagi. She is my hero, and Pattern Recognition by William Gibson. Those two are probably two of my favorite cyberpunk things. You know, one of them has beautiful animation and is from the 80s and is very early on, and Pattern Recognition is kind of more contemporary, which I think is cool. So, Fraser, how about you?
I thought we only had to choose one, so I
We
laboriously had to condense it. For me, the latest thing I think that influences a lot of my writing is a book called The Fortunate Fall. I don't know if people have heard of it.
No.
It's really interesting. It was published in 1996, and as far as I know, it's the first cyberpunk book published by someone who refused to identify their gender.
Oh.
And yeah, now they use Z's or pronouns, but back then they were just like, I'm not telling you, basically. And it's by Raphael Chandler. It's a really good book about a person who has to give up essentially their like personality to become a broadcast personality. They're like chipped and have like a stream suppressor inside of them to become like a CNN personality, except when they broadcast to people, everyone can feel what they feel, like their emotions, their hype, what they're thinking. It all gets kind of sent to everybody, and it's kind of about resisting when you're like a commodity. It's really good. Everyone
Whoa.
should check it out.
That sounds awesome. I'm into it.
Yeah. What about you,
Cool.
Banana Chan?
Are you still frozen?
Oh, are you? Uh-oh.
I think she's frozen, so we can go to Phil and come back to Banana.
Sure. I would say my favorite. It was probably one of the first ones I got into when I started getting into cyberpunk. Is the short story Burning Chrome.
Yes.
It's easily my favorite. In the Gibson, I guess it's probably considered part of the Sprawl series, even as a short story. And I love it. It's a heist, and I love heists, and it is kind of the I don't know, it's like one of the earliest runs. So later when Cyberpunk and Shadowrun and stuff would come out, like it was pretty simple to guess what you were going to do because it was kind of like Burning Chrome, and I really like that one. I kind of like just the way the story ties together. So it's always been a favorite of mine. It's something I've always kept somewhere like it's always in a bookshelf somewhere nearby.
Is that's the one that is part of a series of short stories, right? That is also titled Burning Chrome?
Yeah. So it's the collection of short stories, and then it's the actual title short story Burning Chrome.
Cool. Yeah, I remember my favorite one from that was like something Rose Hotel or something.
Oh yeah.
Blue Rose Hotel.
No.
Yeah,
Is it Blue Rose?
No, it's
There's
Yeah,
so
it
much
is.
Blue Rose in the world. Like it's like Twin Peaks Blue Rose and Blue Rose romantic role playing game, and that's
Yeah.
funny.
It's
Yeah, that book is actually, like, if you look on Goodreads, they label it as Sprawl 0.
Oh wow,
Yeah, so they think it's before that as well.
that's cool.
That's also got Johnny Mnemonic in it,
Yep.
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah,
it's New Rose Hotel.
Yeah.
Nero's
Nero's
Hotel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
It
there
does
was a
sound
row.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a cool choice. So I think Banana is back from the glitch. Is from Glitch City.
Yeah.
Would you like to share your favorite cyberpunk property?
I guess like
Oh, that's fun.
Shadowrun's cool. Akira. I did mention before in the chat I like Judge Dredd, and I have to mention it because when I think of Judge card game, and Mega City One's like cyberpunk-ish. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it feels. I forget all the Judge Dredd stuff. Like, I liked the new movie a whole lot, and
Yes.
definitely thought it was cyberpunk. Like, and it had what's her face, who's from like Game of Thrones, and she plays like the badass villain.
Yeah, that was so good. I love that
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I feel like that's 100% cyberpunk. So that's cool. And is your card game like on Kickstarter or something, or?
No, so we're self-publishing it. It should be out in September.
Cool.
For the creator / designer of it, I'm
Just.
you know.
Just doing all the serious work, no big deal. No, that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, and Akira is a classic. I mean, there's this whole video on YouTube about the animation of light in Akira, and how like innovative it was at the time. Like you can just see how so much of the motion in the animation is light focused. So yeah, I don't know. If you're into Akira, go check out that video on YouTube. It's like I think it's by Nerdwriter1.
It is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah.
I love that guy.
Is Hamish here still?
Oh. Can you hear me?
Hamish?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Hello. That's okay. We're in Glitch City.
I see Hamish's picture on the Twitch channel.
Yeah. Wait, can you hear me?
But
Interesting.
I guess they can't
he
hear me.
knows Sprocket right now. So.
He's a swirly. He
Yeah.
should be here.
I
imagine
am.
if he was here, he would say something.
I am
So-
saying things.
Yeah. I
Oh,
wonder
you
if
can
he's
hear
been
me.
talking the whole time.
Okay, wait. Okay, so there's clearly
Oh my
an
God.
issue where. Oh, I'm just gonna shut up.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll just continue on, and Hamish will. So that we can continue entertaining.
Yeah.
What was the third question?
How cyberpunk has influenced our game design.
Yes. Wow. I don't even know where to start with that question, to be honest. It's like all of my game design has some cyberpunk elements, especially when it comes to some kind of inequality, like some kind of class or race inequality. Like I often put that in all of my games, even if they're not cyberpunk influenced. And I'm working on my cyberpunk white whale baby game. Sync right now. Yeah, I'm just gonna finish it. I'm just gonna do it. It's been 2 years, and yeah, it's very much it's influenced by, I realized the other day, late 90s cyberpunk. So like I mean in 90s, so like hackers and pattern recognition, like that era of cyberpunk where it's a more established genre and it begins to focus very narrowly on very specific issues and specific characters, and there is a little bit more gender and race and sexuality diversity than in a lot of earlier cyberpunk, which credit to William Gibson. He's like one of the only dude cyberpunk writers I can read, because he writes like good, cool, believable lady characters that I feel like I can empathize with, and part of the reason I liked Hackers so much is because of Angelina Jolie. So it's definitely like, representation is important. type of thing. And so yeah, so I try to like emulate a lot of that stuff, like the social issues. I think in cyberpunk are my favorite issues to highlight, and stuff that has to do with gender or transness. You know, with Major Kusanagi being a cyborg. You know, what is her body and how does she relate to her body, and is she you know, what gender is she, is all stuff that is dealt with in that, which I influences a lot of my game design personally. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but okay, we'll talk about more once we've all done things. So Fraser, how about you?
I think something similar to me. I really like exploring issues about like the human condition, what resistance is, especially like how we would define punk now versus how we would define it when the movement was actually happening, and the kind of schism that people talk about with that. Basically, you're either in one camp or the other. And I really like exploring people having varying degrees of agency, but still being able to be the protagonists of the story and actually get things done when ostensibly they should not be able to. I think that's the major things. Maybe I like playing all around a lot with the illusion of choice. In the Veil, people are pretty badass protagonists, but as they go through it, they realize that they're not changing maybe as much as they could, at least through violence, which is what I find interesting about the game. But yeah, stratifications of class, illusion of choice, human condition, happy things like that. That's what I'm into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
How about
some
you?
good stuff.
What about you, Banana Chan?
Similarly, yeah, I'm all into those things too. Also, I guess like the idea of like surveillance and like having this higher power like pulling everything. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, not sure.
You're very low.
Yeah, you're just low. I
It's
can hear you, but you're
it's
like
they
quiet.
can't hear me. So there's no point talking.
Okay, yeah, my screen keeps freezing, so I'm not sure if I'm like going through.
Oh yeah.
Well, now not so much.
So you definitely.
You're definitely robotic now, though.
I keep glitching, so I don't know if I'm going.
This is awesome.
We just heard I'm glitching.
which is funny.
But I couldn't hear the rest.
Okay.
That sounds good. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
How
stupid
about-
technology.
How about to Phil then for now?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my biggest influences, I think, are ideas about corporations, the legality of corporations doing certain things, and kind of overreaching. IntroHACKers has a lot to do. IntroHACKers has a lot to do. It started off very cyberpunk, and as I trimmed the game, it actually lost a little bit of its cyber and really focused on hydropunk, about the ideas of stealing water and stuff. In a world where drinkable water isn't naturally occurring, and that it's controlled by corporations. And a lot of that was inspired by actual stories of corporations now pumping water during. I mean, this happened a few years ago when I was starting to write IntroHACKers. There was a corporation in California that was pumping water out of aquifers in the middle of a drought because they owned it, and they could just do that and sell it. And it really got me into this thought of it felt very cyberpunk, right? Like the control of water by corporations and handed out to people as a corporate commodity, not as a natural resource. And then the punk part of me then is like, well, then you jam it, like you take up arms and you you fight back. And so that's basically what Hydro Hackers is about. Street level Robin Hoods stealing water from corporations to keep their neighborhoods alive, and that's a huge theme for me. I've always liked that. I've always liked the idea of overreaching corporations, which then also gets into the some of the things that everyone else has said about class and things like that, because that's I think once you have a corporate once you have something where corporations are kind of in control, then you have people who are not, and you instantly have that have not kind of thing. So I think it's probably been one of the biggest influences for me.
Yeah, that's cool. That reminds me of what's going on in Flint right now too. With or Puerto Rico. Like basically they could fix it.
The news about Flint came out, I think, like a month or two after I started writing my first draft, and
yeah,
I like sent the article around to my partners, and I was like, wow, like, here's the city government that was like, oh well, we're saving a few bucks, and we'll just poison everybody in the meantime because that saved us some money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that even happens sometimes in Ohio. Like we've had water warning stuff, and so I don't know. It's not Michigan isn't that far from me.
Yeah. Well, it's been years, right? Like since they've been dealing with that issue, Flint, right?
Oh yeah, years. And they're saying now it's okay to drink, but I don't think everybody quite believes that that's completely true.
Also, so it's come to light that chat can hear Hamish, but we cannot. It's pretty funny.
An evil laugh they will never hear.
Oh wait, no, I can hear him just now.
Wait, did you hear that?
Yeah.
All right, I'm back. I don't know what happened.
He's here.
Okay, so now do the 3 questions.
Okay, all right. So that's funny. I was just starting to take notes, and I was saying in the chat on Twitch that I might like stream for a little bit afterwards and contribute my own things, but I don't need to. But I think everything that I would have brought up in terms of my favorite, my big inspirations has already been mentioned. Burning Chrome, New Rose Hotel, Johnny Mnemonic, Shadowrun, Ghost in the Shell. But New Rose Hotel for me is, when people ask what the Sprawl is based on, like New Rose Hotel is the number one thing, and then Burning Chrome and Johnny Mnemonic as the secondary ones. For all of that those same reasons that Phil said about like corporate stuff and control and what it means to have control of a resource and be exploiting it, and people being resources, all that kind of stuff. So all right, I feel like I've caught up.
Wait, what's your favorite?
Well, he's got the favorite property. Who are you, though, Hamish?
I introduced myself earlier. Did you guys not hear that either?
No.
Well, that's weird because I don't think I was talking over anyone. Was I? Okay, well, I am Hamish Cameron. I designed the Sprawl, and I nominally make this Twitch channel work. Work being a loose operation of the term. I feel like... Was there anything else I needed to say? Probably not. I feel like people on this channel probably know who I am. And if you don't, you can find me on Peregrine Kiwi everywhere.
Yeah, you're not breaking up a little bit, but I think your push to talk is pretty low, so it's only catching some of your words. That happens with Discord sometimes. If you lower the push to talk.
I don't have push to talk on. I just looked at that.
Or like, the little bar where it picks up your voice, if you lower it so that when you're quieter, it'll pick you up.
Okay, how about now?
So like a lower in.
Yeah, the input thing.
Is this input sensitivity? How is this sounding?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
good?
better.
Okay, cool.
Try talking in sentences now, though. What about
Talk to you
how
in
has
sentences.
Cyberpunk influenced your game design, and then we'll find out.
How has Cyberpunk influenced my game design? I mean, my primary game design is a Cyberpunk game, so pretty deeply. But I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I was writing a paper on Shadowrun, and I had cause to reread Shadowrun First Edition as world stuff, And over the process of doing that, I came to realize that the kind of conspiracy mentality of cyberpunk is something that is really big in most of my gaming. That there are these like, shadowy manipulators that you can't see and can't control that are up above everything, controlling things. That tends to be how I run D&D as well.
The omnipresence.
Yeah,
method.
Basically. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a solid one. I don't often think about that as much. I feel like a few of you are thinking about it on a high level of like the conspiracy and conspirators and corporations, and I'm more on the low level, like people and relationships. Like that's how I often, like sometimes I'm like, who here? What? I don't know. There's like a conspiracy. It's up there, whatever. But how does that character feel about that other character?
Yeah.
That's
well, the
why
Veil tries to do both.
Yeah.
Get some feels too.
Yeah. No, that's why I'm excited to see Sync come out, because my game explicitly doesn't mechanize that. Like, you do that at the table in that role-playing space. The Veil kind of does it in the mechanics as well, but Sync is going to really center that, I think.
Oh gosh, I hope so.
No pressure.
It's mostly just incentivizing you to do like emotional labor for your friends in order to get activism done.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the economy or whatever, the XP economy. Like you have to gather points from that in order to like make moves against the groups that are kind of threatening your neighborhood is the idea, and your friends and your marginalized friends and stuff like that.
Wow. And the driver playbook with it being basically a Ryan Gosling image, I was like, yes.
I love drivers, but they tend to suck in games.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So because it's always like, what does the driver do? I don't know, the car. So they show up sometimes with the car.
You can't control me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I try to think of more like in the Ryan Gosling sense, or even in like the Vin Diesel, Fast Furious sense, like what is that character actually about, and like emotionally, and how do they relate to people, and how can I turn that into cool things that drivers can do. So that's what I was trying to do with the driver anyway. I don't know. Is there a driver character in the Sprawl or in the Veil or
Yep.
In the Sprawl, right?
In the Sprawl, it's called the driver.
Well,
one of the things that one of the
what?
things that I always do when I run the Sprawl at conventions, and people will regularly pick the driver because drivers are cool, right? And I always say to the team at the start, okay, so you've got these team members, you can approach this mission however you want. If you have a driver in the team, and half the time they do, you can make it about mobility. I usually explicitly say this. And then in reality, what happens is they make a mission that is about the driver sitting in their car, or maybe dropping them in and dropping them out. And that's fine. Like I've played this game enough that I can make that work. Like I can make enough interesting things happen outside the facility so that they can be engaged in the game. But it's like it is a little bit like a self-fulfilling prophecy that I try my best to avoid them going down that path, but they want to go down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's true in Apocalypse World too. Like the driver in Apocalypse World is kind of similar to that in some ways. Like I can see its progenitor, its timeline basically.
It's slightly trickier actually in Apocalypse World, because in Apocalypse World you don't have the mission conceit that the Sprawl does.
Yeah.
So you just
That's
have
true.
the cool dude with his car. And the thing that we realized, because I actually played a driver when I last played Apocalypse World, which was a while ago now, the GM has to realize, the MC has to realize that everyone wants the driver and his car. So they kind of become a magnet for everyone else's desires. And they're like, no, I'm too cool for school. I'm too cool for school. I'm too good. No, get away from me. Get away. No, I won't use my car for that. And you just have to keep like pointing NPCs at them. And then it works really well as a kind of unintentional focus of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, it's not like Fury Road or anything. like Apocalypse World Fury Road, where like everyone's a driver.
Yeah. Although Mad Max is kind of in that position in that movie.
Yeah.
Like,
That
do
would be
things
so
for me.
rad.
Do things for me.
Is Banana Chan still here, by the way?
I'm not sure. It
Yeah.
seems like she is
Say
not.
something.
Like you can't see her on the Twitch stream.
Oh, you
but
can't?
We can see her frozen here, so it may just be that her connection was really crappy.
I don't see her. Oh, now she's completely. Oh no, she's
Oh,
kind of back.
hey.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Hey. She
We were
returns
just talking about you.
on cue.
Oh no, now you're muted or something.
Yeah.
Are we having so many problems? Sure.
I like your angry face, though. Son of a... Oh, yeah, I can hear you, I think.
I can't.
Say some more stuff?
No.
No. I can swear I just heard
Yeah, me too.
her.
I'm imagining you wearing a Judge Dredd mask right now and like destroying the Discord. Yeah, I don't know why we can't hear you.
That was the other thing from earlier, actually, that I wanted to. Oh, what's she gonna do? That was a good exit. That
I
was a
don't
pro exit. One of the other things that I wanted to mention from earlier is when Banana Chan mentioned Dread, A+ for that movie. Like, I don't know the Dread universe like you were saying, Kira, but that last movie, totally cyberpunk for me. Went straight onto the inspiration list for this role.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Such a good movie.
It's amazing.
And one of the best 3D movies ever, actually.
Totally.
The drone
Especially with all the
sequences.
shards of glass.
Yeah, they were super
Yes.
good. Yes! She is the law.
Here it is.
Now you just need the grimace.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Oh,
We
wait,
can kind of
hello.
hear you. It might be that you have to go into your mic settings thing and do the same thing that Hamish did.
Oh,
where
yeah, in Discord?
He, like, turned off or turned down the sensitivity. The automatic.
Turn it up? Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, I turned
Yeah.
mine down to about a third of the way up.
Yeah. Although, Hamish, yours is still breaking a little bit, so I'd lower yours even
Oh, you
more.
want me to? Okay, let me get in there.
Yeah.
Let me give
Same
them. Let me
problem.
give the stream the behind the scenes look here.
Hey, behind the scenes. This is what all the hackers are doing.
Yeah, you get to see the gear icon in the settings. Ooh.
No.
I get to see
Do
what
you
kind of
have
microphone I
any
use and
drivers in
How about
your?
that?
I feel like hydro.
Hydro hackers.
fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be like a thing for cars or drivers or something.
No, water can't be wasted on cars at this point. So so cars are electric. I don't actually have a full-on driver. In fact, the game's actually fairly low violence. That there's only one playbook that's actually any good at fighting. Everybody else is good at sneaking and stealing and things like that and social skills. But there's actually one playbook, and if it's not in the game, violence is it's not off the table, but it's really costly. So if I always tell people when I'm running it, if you pick this playbook, it brings a certain amount of violence back to the game. But if not, then this game is really a lot about social hacking, digital hacking, and sneaking around. So it gets a little more like Thief and a little less smash and grab.
That's so cool. That's what I'm trying to do with Sync too, where it's I don't have any violent move, basically. Like you can't really. There's 3 playbooks that have fuck someone up is what the move is called, and they can kind of fight a little, but everyone else fights like if it was you in a fight, like in real life.
Yeah, that's the move that's in the basic moves for fighting, which is called. I think it's called. Even on a 10+, you still wind up having a cost for it yourself.
Yeah.
And then the Neighborhood Watch is the name of the playbook. That one has its own fight move called Throwdown that is much better. And so they are like the one person that if fight has to happen, they're the one person who can really get away with it. Everyone else can do it, but you're going to pay for it in some way.
So it's really interesting how in cyberpunk tabletop role-playing games, like for a long, there's Cyberpunk 2020 and there's Shadowrun, and they really focus on fighting. You know, there's a whole book
Mhm.
full of guns for Cyberpunk 2020, and like gear, and like a lot of rules for like how to have fights is like the main focus of the game. And I feel like a lot of Cyberpunk, I don't know if games are finally catching up to the 90s Cyberpunk. I'm not sure. How does this fit in? Does this fit into your wave theory, Fraser?
It's not my theory, right? It's just academia classifying genres and subgenres, really. So
Cool.
yeah.
So this is an academic cyberpunk classification.
Yeah, most of the time, if people are talking about waves, it's only relevant in academia, I would say. I haven't.
Until it
I haven't-
crosses over into the wider discourse, like first, second, third wave
Yeah.
feminism or use of millennials is a good example.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but mostly it's like the first wave is all the white people writing about cyberpunk. Second wave is like they declared it dead, people kept writing, and then third wave is ostensibly what we are in now.
So cool. So like, so it's interesting because depending on the media, it's like it doesn't matter kind of what decade it fits in. Like, because if we're talking about tabletop games, I feel like we might be in the second wave.
Tabletop games is wildly different than like all other cyberpunk stuff. It's like its own thing. Lowell Francis has a cyberpunk list on his Patreon. He does the list of tabletop games, and
Oh, cool.
he did a series on just cyberpunk games from like literally the first one to a broader classification of all of the ones up till now, like the Veil, Sprawl, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And it does not resemble anything like the literature or the media. It's its own weird thing.
That's
I mean,
really interesting.
I think that.
I mean, I guess because Cyberpunk 2020, I mean, he is not a white creator. Like Mike Pondsmith is black, so and he's one of the first cyberpunk tabletop game creators.
The first, actually.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Hamish?
Yeah, Mike. Well, so Mike Pondsmith is the first. Yeah, Cyberpunk, like 2013,
Oh, cool. It
as
came
we now call it,
before
was the
Shadowrun.
first. Yeah, by 2 years, and it kind of spawned this like GURP Cyberpunk and Shadowrun and Rollmaster Cyberpunk and a couple of other things all came out like a couple of years after that.
Right, and it was Cyberpunk 2013 was the first one
Yeah.
because that was the black box,
Mm-hmm.
and then 2020 was the revision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was only
Yeah.
like 1992, I want to say. So it came out super quick after, or maybe a bit earlier than that. Shadowrun
No, it was
Season
earlier.
Edition
I was in
92.
high school. I was running, so that was pre-90.
Okay.
So I was running Cyberpunk late 80s.
Badass.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
thing
And
about
there's a couple. Oh, sorry.
the
What?
thing you were saying, Kira, about games catching up with the 90s, or about literature, whichever that was anyway. I mean, I think that thing about games having a lot of combat systems is really the thing that the indie movement in the early 2000s changed as a whole separate thing. Because if you look back at all of those games that we just mentioned, they all look exactly like D&D in terms of the structure of the book. Like the intro paragraph, the stuff about character creation, a lengthy combat section. It was actually surprising to me when I went back to look at Shadowrun first edition and even second edition, how little it even talks about cyberware. Like there are literally 2 or 3 paragraphs in that entire book about cyberware, and then a whole lot of sort of shopping lists and technical specifications, but fewer than there are guns.
Oh, yeah. Banana, try saying something.
Hello.
Yeah.
I can hear
yeah.
you. We hear it.
Is it like
She's got-
louder now, or?
Nah,
It's
dude.
still low, but we can hear you.
Yeah. You might have to hold your mic up or something.
Hello.
Yeah, that works.
A little bit better.
Yeah. I liked your mask.
Yeah, it was super good.
Now you're robotic hard.
I like your robot
No.
voice.
I wonder. Yeah. I wish there was a way that you could type and I feel bad that you're just quiet, like not being able to talk. Like,
Yeah, I think it might be some kind of internet connection thing, though.
yeah.
Oh.
Cool. I just feel bad. I want you to be able to join in.
Should be too, yeah.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it sucks. I actually I didn't realize that Banana was into cyberpunk stuff as much, which is funny because she has awesome style. And then I forget when I found out that you were into it, and then I was like, "Will you write a cyberpunk game for my cyber witchy zine Resistor? Because we need a cool game." And she wrote this awesome game about surveillance, actually, and you play it in a chat room, or like on a Facebook chat, and you all like pick characters in the Facebook chat, and then you pretend to not know who you are. And yeah, it's pretty rad. I like stuff like that incorporates different media, but I don't know that there's too many tabletop games that do that too much. Like there's a board game that does it. XCOM does it, right?
Is XCOM a board game too?
There is an XCOM board game
Oh wow.
Yeah.
that has an app component.
Yeah.
Oh.
Cool.
So use the app to you like pass the app around like on a tablet, or you have it on your phones like while you're playing
Oh, cool. I've only played the
the video game.
yeah, that tactical strategy game thing. The
I don't know which one
FF
she-
Tactics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess she's gone forever now. Hey?
Yeah. She said she'd come back, so we'll see. Maybe she'll come back with a better connection.
Is this gonna be forever? Yeah. Okay.
So sad.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just
I'm-
looking through Lowell's list of cyberpunk games. So many of these were on my bookshelf. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
How does Hydro Hackers treat the like art? Is it a commodity still, or what?
treats what as a
Art, like if water is a scarcity and stuff like that, are people like trading Monets and shit for a couple ounces of water, or what?
so what winds up happening is that the rich stay rich, so they're fine, right? Like they can afford off-world water, right? So they get their water from Europa and Mars and get it melted and brought back fresh, where everyone else gets theirs recycled. So so you wind up with like the rich wind up not having to suffer too much because they wind up being in control of everything and getting good access to water. Everyone else scrapes by, and that's actually, the game is like set very much at a street level, and it's very much about kind of bringing back the idea of like the early 20th century neighborhood, like where everybody is looking out for each other, and like the one person, like somebody knows like everybody's kids on the block, that kind of thing, because you can't you have to work together to scrape by to survive, because it's it's too risky. And while everyone has water rations, everybody winds up misusing it or having a bad month or something and starts running low. So you wind up I mean, that was part of the very cyberpunky part, is that the rich are fine, like they're great, they're they don't have to have water detectors on their faucets to make sure the water's drinkable. Like they know as soon as they turn it on, like they have water security as opposed to everyone else.
Right. So unless you've got that Schwimmer money, then you're going analog.
That's right.
Nice. That sounds fun.
It seems like Banana got totally kicked off words, so we're gonna try again next time.
Rough.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. Well, it could be worse. It could have never happened at all.
That's true. We could have never gotten the Judge Dredd mask.
That's true.
That was
Man, that was so good.
That was a thing. That was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Banana was hit by black eyes.
Someone
Yeah.
should make a
Exactly,
clip of
Yeah.
that, actually.
Yeah.
No, I was What are some of the games from like the 2000s? Like what indie cyberpunk games do I not know about that don't deal with violence?
Don't deal with violence.
Tech Noir doesn't center it.
I'm
No.
taking a quick look.
Hamish started talking about it like it was a thing.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tech Noir doesn't center violence.
You're right.
There's no combat section in that. But apart from that, like, what other indie cyberpunk games were there? Tech Noir, and then all
That's
of
like
ours.
the only one, right?
Oh no! Wait, there's one more. What is it? Something tomorrow.
Remember Tomorrow.
Remember
Tomorrow. Yes. And Always Never Now. But those both,
yeah.
when did they come out? I don't
Always
know the
Never
dates
Now
on
is
those.
pretty, like.
Always
usually
Never Now is a
violent.
revenge story, so yeah, it's about violence. But it's about violence because the story is a revenge story, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I haven't played Remember Tomorrow.
I have. It plays a lot like William Gibson stories.
Okay.
Like that's the purpose of it, I think, where you're basically constructing a story through memories. It's very story gamey where there's not too many rules,
Right.
like mechanics and dice rolling type things. You just kind of like take turns, as I recall, like telling different parts of a story, and that prompts something. It's kind of Baron von Munchausen-y.
Mm. Cool.
Yeah, I only played it like once though, so I could be misremembering.
I've been next to a table at which people were playing it, but that's
Yeah.
Oh, really? Interesting.
It's on my shelf.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
on my shelf. I haven't played it.
Yeah, I can't get my local friends to play. I have run Tech Noir though. Before I was really into Tech Noir because I play tested it with Jeremy Keller, and I was like, he had invented a car thing. I think I'm really into cyber cars where the cars have spheels, so instead of wheels, they're like complete, globes, and so the cars could do like all these interesting maneuvers because of that. And I was like, I love your game, Jeremy.
Because of the car.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I was sold. I don't remember much of the rest of the game. Another part of the game was that the Gen Con convention megaplex was a setting in the game. Only it was like in the future, but it was like, it's a convention town. It's the convention megaplex city.
I love it.
Nice.
Somebody in the chat room is saying they want a friendly, happy cyberpunk knitting game. But did anyone see that article today about the somebody fed a bunch of knitting stuff to neural networks, and then like people went back and actually knitted the things the neural networks came up with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely what inspired that comment. 100%.
Yeah. It's just wild.
Yeah.
Well, I do have to say, in the Veil, one of the playbooks is the aesthetic, which is like basically you're the Skinner, except you can choose whatever art form that you want.
You're the Skinner, but with knitting.
Yeah,
Bro.
and somebody actually in
Bro.
the chat room, Lauren, she played somebody who was knit punk, and she could literally influence politics and shit with her knit bombs.
That's so cool.
That is,
you know,
that is good.
Fraser, now you're making me think I need an artist playbook for like for my game. Like I'm now thinking Hydro Hackers needs like some sort of like street artist or something is
Absolutely. Yeah, a street artist would be a cool one for your game, it sounds, because it's so focused on neighborhood. I have one in Sync that's the designer, so it's more like the William Gibson style, like industrial designer, graphic designer, fashion designer.
I'm taking notes.
Next time.
Well, art is so essential to cyberpunk, right? There's something about old artifacts and new artifacts and them existing in the same space there.
On Mona Lisa Overdrive is basically like, this is what happens when you commodify art, and also I'm really angry because nobody bought my screenplay.
Yeah, pattern recognition. The freelance job that the main character is on is that she has to figure out who's making these weird internet videos,
right?
And trace it back. And a gallery owner who like wants to acquire the videos like puts her up to this task. Like it's just like an art finding mission.
That's right.
And that's that's a lot like one of the threads in Count Zero, right? In Count Zero, there's the one thread where the the rich old guy is looking for who's making those boxes.
Yeah, Vecchione.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean I think that's a thing you see, like Gibson. It's not, it's a thing that Gibson does from time to time in his writing.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think at its heart, it generally tends to comment on capitalism and what it does to people who are basically only allowed to do the thing that they love if it, yields them money and that they can survive. And then over time, it's just basically ramped up to more and more of that kind of thought.
Yeah, that's the bit I always.
I think Mona Lisa Overdrive's the first time that I saw it so overt. What was that, Hamish?
I was going to say that sort of capitalism linking to art angle is exactly the part that I always remember from that stuff about Vecchione in that book, because he has the great line, "Aspects of my wealth have become autonomous," which I just love. He's like so rich that he can't even control the fringes of what he owns, which is like hyper capitalism, like A+.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I have a visual art background, so I have a lot of complex feelings about art and capitalism. Like artists should be paid. Artists have always been paid.
Radical. And
you can't just like be in this magical place where you're just making art for yourself all the time, and art is for other people anyway. What are you doing? And it's interesting. I don't know. It's interesting the contemporary vision we have of the artist being like this mystical soul, kind of just creating beautiful things and putting it out into the world, versus I think what artists have always done, which is like create meaningful cultural artifacts, useful objects, and like the Guernica, like political commentary that everyone sees and influences kind of their understanding of the world. Like movies do that today. I think the most as art. It's interesting in the cyberpunk context and capitalist context because like who's controlling it basically. That's what I always think of. Like where is the money coming from to make this political agenda? And it's like the problem in Hollywood right now with diversity. Like where's the money? Can we convince Hollywood to cast lead women in major blockbusters? Because that's where the money is coming from. It's not the directors and it's not the actors. It's the money. So I think that's really interesting in cyberpunk settings.
Yeah, and that's why Black Panther.
Oops.
And now it's like the third most grossing movie of all time or something.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
Yeah.
And meanwhile on Twitter there's always these guys who are like, oh, it's only doing well because all these communities are buying tickets for like kids. And I'm like, yeah, that's why it's the third most grossing movie in the world, buddy. Yeah, sure. Right? Like it's weird that people don't think that even in capitalism doing the right thing can like make you money as well, right? Like it's strange.
Yeah, and I mean cyberpunk is like a and I don't know, in a lot of ways it's the capitalism gone wrong, extra wrong.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, turned up to 11.
What was that, Hamish?
Capitalism turned up to 11.
Right.
What was turned up to 11?
Capitalism.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but sometimes he gets cut off on his first word or something.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, if you
Capitalism.
Oh my god.
I got it now.
There was a space between every letter. Sorry, Phil.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm just when talking about capitalism turned up to 11. I mean, like I remember as a teenager, like Neuromancer was those, it was that same fear of like the Japanese industrialization kind of conquering, good old U.S. Steel cars and and things like that. And there were other movies that weren't even science fiction, played on those same themes. So that idea of just this kind of rampant capitalism, like where it's it produces faster, makes more money, grows bigger than everything else. Like that was, that wasn't just a theme in Cyberpunk. That was like a fear people had.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it basically was either like, oh no, Asians are taking over, or we got to get them Russians. Good, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty much all of my childhood, right? Like
Yeah.
we were either going to lose all of our industry, or we were all going to be reduced to a radioactive wasteland, and that was, it just fluctuated week to week on which on which one of those it was going to be.
As a side note to that is why you see so much Asian city influence in contemporary cyberpunk media, like in in the new Blade Runner. Like, why are they in an Asian-looking city? Like, why does this look like Hong Kong or like Korea? And the reason is because cyberpunk comes from the 80s, where there was a lot of paranoia around Japan still and Russia still with the Cold War and just like everything you just said about industry. It's really interesting. Like it's like a visual holdover with no contemporary meaning.
Yeah, totally. Well,
Then it became a trope, and then it just like got sucked into all as things went further.
Well, but it also embodies like the fan base as well, right? Like most of the fan base is unwilling to recognize any cyberpunk literature past the point when Bruce Sterling said it was dead, right?
Yeah, but
that guy.
Bruce Sterling said it was dead in like 1987, so I don't think Snow Crash had even come out. I don't know. I feel like cyberpunk fans are more willing than that. Like I think are more willing to accept more recent things as being like cyberpunk and accept that cyberpunk is still a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm like waiting for more cyberpunk stuff to come out all the time.
And then there's Beyond G Plus writing articles about how her is cyberpunk just to piss off the people in that 21,000 group of cyberpunk community.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple of cyberpunk groups on Facebook that are not exactly getting cyberpunk, like that guy on Reddit who didn't like your game and said that cyberpunk shouldn't have politics.
I don't know any
in it.
of this. What is this?
You didn't hear about that?
There are some people in the world who think that cyberpunk is not political, and I don't know what to say to those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same people who think nothing is political, right?
Yeah. We should have an entire episode on that, probably, actually, like the different political things that are in Cyberpunk. Yeah.
But it was because some guy got mad that Hack the Planet, the game I'm working on now, is incorporating climate fiction, and he's like, "Why are you making it political all of a sudden?" And everyone's like, "What?"
So watch out, Phil. This water stuff, it's too political.
It's coming. It'll be coming for me. Yeah.
If it's anywhere, it's on Reddit. That's for sure.
That is outrageous and completely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I bet the guy, honestly, if Eric screen capped it and then put it on Twitter, so if anything, he probably helped me out. And
that's how I saw it, because I like jumped onto I think that Twitter thread and had to post a few times.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting though, because so we have the Hamish's new game that's coming out is basically a reimagining of Shadowrun, right, Hamish?
Oh, Touched?
Yeah, Touched.
Oh, yeah, I guess. I don't consider it a new game. Like, it's just a setting supplement, basically. Yeah.
Right. Well, what you were saying, though, about how it does the same generational skip stuff as the stuff that I was doing with the Further Veil is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then we have, like, the community building sync and hydro hackers. And then mine's climate fiction with cyberpunk, so it's interesting where it's all going, and it'll be fun when people tell us that our games aren't cyberpunk. I'm looking forward to that.
Someone was like, Kira, as soon as you put out your non-violent game to make it violent, so you can be violent, and like miss the point of the non-violence in cyberpunk to begin with. And I'm like, well, I mean, you can't control people too, and that's fine if that's where their happy place is,
The streets.
But yeah, I mean, like when I make games, I make what I want to play. So like I've played all these other cyberpunks, and none of them are doing, you know, the feels and the relationships and you know, the activism. So, you know, I want Hackers the game.
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me if I was going to write either a supplement or write into the main game how to play the Water Authority, the corporation that actually controls and controls the flow of water. And I was like, no, I'm not putting mechanics for playing the oppressors in this game. Like, they're awful. Like, no, like I don't want to make a game about, you know, rolling into poor neighborhoods and, you know, taking water back from people who are trying to survive. Like,
Oh yeah, no.
no. So I was like, no, they'll never actually be that side of the game. It's always going to be the neighborhood fighting against the corporation.
It'll be interesting because one of the stretch goals for Hack the Planet was to play Tracers, like the Blade Runners of it. So I'm interested to see what people think that playbook is going to be and what it's actually going to be, which is going to be like, sure, so how did you like get turned into systemic oppression? Basically, people just be like, but I just want the gun and run around and get at the people. I'm like, sure, but you're not a person anymore. Let me tell you why. Let's explore your identity.
Have you ever seen the game Corporation?
No.
I've heard of
Is
it.
this a board game?
No, it's an
role playing
RPG. It's a little less indie, a little more traditional, but you play agents of these corporations, and you go like enacting their agenda. And I don't know if it was designed like, every time I've played it, everybody who's played it has been like an awful person. Like, you just like, you are empowered to basically be awful. And it's really interesting because you do wind up playing like the oppressors and not the oppressed. And like, when I ran it a long time ago, I thought it was an interesting twist. And like, as my tastes have changed, I'm like, oh, I'm not so comfortable with this. I'm not so comfortable with this topic the way it's laid out anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like old school vampire. Like, you're playing the villains, you know, you're the bad guys and you like being the bad guy. You're emo, you're bad guys and you drink blood and you kill people. I don't know. But no, there's a game, there's an indie game that does that really well because it's about colonization. Dog Eat Dog.
Dog Eat Dog is so good. So good. Best
Yeah.
game
Will
ever.
punch you in the feels.
I think like one of the first things, like when you create characters, like you have to do it based on
Who brings in the most money?
who brings in the most money in real life.
Well, yeah, that's
real life.
the first question is the wealthiest player. And then you have to
Wealthiest,
decide what that means. I ran this game, like I had my class play this game in a couple of semesters ago, and just right from the bat, that provokes fantastic discussions. They're all like looking at me like, what do you mean? And it's like, that's up to you. You decide who the wealthiest person is. So good.
Oh my god. I never thought about that in relation to cyberpunk games before, but it would be interesting to look at that system and see how it could apply to different cyberpunk games.
Huh.
I always wanted to do a hack of Dogs in the Vineyard for Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
Cool.
That would, like, I played it one time and I was like, so this is Judge Dredd? And people were like, kind of is Judge Dredd, isn't it? Just like, not hardcore, you know, Mormon beliefs. You would just be like, here's the coat, here's the law, right? Do the thing.
Yeah.
I think that would be...
Play that hack.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, because that's all about, Dogs in the Vineyard is all about like power, kind of how you use your power, your policeman power, basically.
Yeah.
They're kind of independent though. They could be we could do an entire episode actually on that as well if we wanted to. We should write these down.
Yeah. Yeah, we really should.
I'm writing them down.
Just like, do you just make all these games?
Like
we can
entire
brainstorm them.
episodes on these
Games we'd
specific
hack in.
topics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can definitely. I'm into this cyber chat stuff because everybody else in real life is just like interested in talking to me about it. Really. Like sometimes I can get them going on it, but usually they're just like, oh yeah, Fraser likes to talk about cyberpunk.
Yeah. So Fraser, I just moved to a city. Have you moved to a city? You should move to a city. People will talk to you in the city.
Yeah, that's true. I live in a town of 13,000 people away from
Oh my
the
God.
city. So, a little bit of that happening. I see people when I buy groceries.
So next time on
Well, that's why
Fraser's
you have
support
the
group.
internet.
We'll have a whole episode on this as well.
Cool. We're getting so many ideas. This is our seed episode.
I'm writing that down. Fraser's
Yeah.
support group.
Fraser Said Life, episode 4.
Oh no. Well,
Speaking
you're always
of,
connected and near somebody, Fraser, because you have a phone. You have a smartphone.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. Well, yeah, it's funny though because like I think in part why I connect so much with Cyberpunk, it was kind of because all the characters and how they're like disaffected and how technology has changed them and stuff is like definitely what's happened to me. Like I grew up always like I had that first like flip phone and I had like I grew up with like a Nintendo and my parents were always like, hey, like why aren't you like us going out and playing? And meanwhile my brother and I are like playing Super Nintendo and shit, right? So I think it's no wonder that Cyberpunk is resounding for me because I'm just like, hey, that's my life. I messed up in that way a little bit.
Oh my God.
I don't think I was too far off from you. My actual entry into Cyberpunk was in actual Cyberpunk. I had this friend who I grew up outside of New York City, and I had this friend who was full 1980s hacker and phone freak, and taught me how to use a telephone tester after he boosted me one out of the back of a Verizon truck, and he had an acquired payphone in his bedroom, and he wrote a cyberpunk zine, and he hung out with the guys from the 2600 Club.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Did he? Oh, it's like a really old club of hackers, and they still have a magazine out on the shelves called 2600.
Yeah. That is actually what Hackers the movie is based on. They interviewed them.
Oh.
Yeah, so he actually was. I mean, he was the guy who put Neuromancer like in my hands, and he's like, "You need to read this book." And PM that actually ran Cyberpunk for us, like when we got it, like it was amazing. But yeah, he was, he did what everybody like. He was a teenage hacker who then became a security consultant because you know that's what you do to not get arrested when you become an adult. So
Yeah.
Get all white hat.
Yeah. That's what my brother does. He's a professional hacker, for security stuff, and he goes to like contemporary hacker school. I don't understand what half of it is, and he's always like, Kira, I just learned this new thing. You can put it in your game maybe. And he's just like, here's how a drone physically hacked into like an airtight something. I'm like, I don't understand half of what you're saying. That's amazing.
Yeah. Just in a document, you're like, drone does cool thing.
Yeah.
hack, like that's the move, like.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, but this is cool stuff. I could turn it into a metaphor. But yeah, no, I mean, that's my dad was like a programmer, and so he always brought home, that he brought home the first laptop with like that was a briefcase with a tiny screen, and I had an Atari when I was growing up and that stuff, so. That's why I got into it, mostly because of my dad, and that's why my brother got into it too, just like computer stuff.
Well, I didn't even like I am definitely the baby gamer here out of all of you for sure, because I only started. My return to indie games was my brother came home from Korea for Christmas and gave me the backer copy of Dungeon World and ran it for me, like one-on-one session.
Aww.
And that's what got me back into gaming. Before I was doing like D&D encounters and hating my life, and then just quit that because it was. I think it's universally just the shittiest experiences that you could have role playing, probably. And it was the worst. I tried Pathfinder too, and I was like, these are the same people. Cool.
I haven't played those, but I believe you.
Oh yeah, it's the same pretty much. For me, it was anyway. In terms of the people playing and what they wanted in the fiction and all that, it was like the typical: you all meet in a bar, and what is the wench wearing, and
Yeah.
like what draft is there and shit. And I'm like, what the is going on? But anyway, so yeah, and then my interest in cyberpunk peaked when Altered Carbon came out. So I'm even kind of a late bloomer with cyberpunk, and then have since gone back and read like a lot. But yeah, it's just interesting. For me, cyberpunk was more like discovering an identity rather than growing up with one, right? Like for you guys, it sounds like you read Neuromancer close to the time that it came out and stuff. Where as with me, when I was reading Altered Carbon, I was like, whoa, this
I
is
didn't.
a lot of what I'm into.
I didn't. I actually caught up on the reading later. All of my was like movie, and like Blade Runner and The Matrix and everything. And then it was just like within the past 5 or 7 years or something that I started being like, I should read cyberpunk too, duh. But it was hilarious because I started reading Neuromancer like in my 30s, and I was like, oh, so this is like I used to go to goth clubs all the time, and that's like what inspired goth clubs.
When I was in college, I took a course on it was topics in science fiction, and one of the books on the list was Neuromancer. And I told the professor, I'm like, all right, if you're ready, like this would be like my 7th reading. So if we're ready to go, like I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this for this segment of the class. And I came up with it. I mean, I came up with it not because somebody gave it to me, but that's how I got into it. And the early stuff when it was early, and then but I remember like when someone gave me another friend of mine gave me a copy of Altered Carbon, and I started reading it. I was like, oh shit, like this is cyberpunk, like I'm in, like, and I was hooked. Like I tore through all those books and the rest of his sci-fi stuff too. Like I loved all of that.
Yeah, I can't remember how old I was when I first read Neuromancer, but I'm pretty sure I started with Neuromancer and the Sprawl trilogy. But it might have been Burning Chrome. Probably not. Probably Neuromancer. And it was probably after I started playing Shadowrun or thereabouts. Like I started gaming in primary school, but I didn't start playing Shadowrun until high school, which was right after it had come out. And then that's probably, I think, when I read all the Gibson books and Snow Crash and all that. And then I went back to it.
I'm older than all of.
Yeah, you might be the cyber granddaddy.
Maybe.
But on that note, actually, because all 3 of you, I think, mentioned Altered Carbon, which probably answers this question, but we had a question in the chat. I'd like to hear your thoughts. This is from Van Gramoon. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Altered Carbon and the other books, aside from the Netflix series. What are your thoughts? Cyberpunk, post-cyberpunk, not cyberpunk?
Oh.
It's post-cyberpunk for sure. It's critically struggling against genre conventions of the first one, in my opinion.
No, I would put it. I would put it in post-cyberpunk. The 3 books they're vastly different. Each book's vastly different. I mean, Altered Carbon is probably the most quote cyberpunky, post-cyberpunky of all of them. The other 2 really push more on straight sci-fi.
Well, the 3rd one is like I guess so, because of the transhumanists.
I mean, well, transhumanism is inescapable from that series, right? Because that is the connecting thread that goes.
But the 3rd one is like,
Yeah, there's some. I don't know. There's a thing in those books. Like, there's always a moment where you discover, like, you think you know how low tack will go, and then like there's a scene, where he explains something, and you're like, nope, never mind. We've reached and the 3rd book, I think, reaches an all-time low for tack in terms of the things he's willing to do. But yeah.
What about you, Kara?
It's I think post-cyberpunk. I think it's damn good. So.
Kara?
I just saw the TV show.
Okay.
The show is no go.
Problematic. It's.
I mean, I would. So in terms of like that question, I would say the first one is definitely cyberpunk, but cyberpunk in an explicitly kind of like neo-noir way, which I guess, as you say, is like going against certain conventions in a deliberate way, thus making it kind of post-cyberpunk. The second two I don't even really think of as cyberpunk, actually. They're, like, once you get to interplanetary travel, the second two are military science fiction for me. Or the second one is military science fiction.
Yeah.
The third one... Yeah.
For sure.
The first one, though, like...
If you're into military stuff, then you'd like it. But for me, I was just like...
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. They changed in tone so drastically and in subject material. Some of the technological explorations are consistent throughout them, but yeah. But that first one, definitely cyberpunk enough that it made it into the bibliography at the back of the sprawl for sure. Like, I read it and I was like, yes. But yeah, in a kind of like post-cyberpunky way. But not as post as the Veil, I don't think. Like, it doesn't go quite that far down like the transhuman.
Oh yeah, for sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Is transhuman, is that what makes post-cyberpunk? Like how much transhumanism can be in cyber, basically, you know? Because like...
Well, there's two classifications of post-cyberpunk. If you're in academia, post means that you're struggling against what the original genre is doing. So you're like labeling it post as like almost a underline red line saying like my book is fucking with this genre, basically subverting it or struggling against it. And then there's just post as in like this came after cyberpunk. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to classification people are using.
I think
Sometimes post cyberpunk for people is just after the first wave.
I think that's probably also a worthwhile topic for another day. We could probably spend a lot of time talking about post cyberpunk and transhumanism and how they relate to each other.
Yeah. Because you talking about the trans carbon and the military stuff made me think of ancillary justice, which I think of as kind of both transhuman and cyberpunk in lots of ways.
Oh, huh.
It's
I would not call
interesting.
it either, actually. For me, that's like straight out far future military. Well, not military, but far future sci-fi.
Really?
Yeah, if my cyberpunk doesn't, if the book doesn't go near Earth, I have a hard time considering it cyberpunk.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good
just
classification.
as
I mean, even because it's usually like even just like orbiting stations. around Earth is like as far as you get in a lot of cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm reading this book Vacuum Flowers now, which is one of the kind of almost pre-cyberpunk. I guess it's cyberpunk, but not inside the movement. Yeah. Super good. But yeah, all in floating. At least so far, I haven't finished it yet. In like these floating orbital situations. So, I mean, I'm down with that.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. I'm not too constricted with that. I think as long as it has, well, the thing that I like the most about cyberpunk is human condition questions, high tech, low life. I tend to be pretty broad in categorizing it, but usually it's like I know it when I read it or see it or feel it or whatever kind of situation. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's definitely hard to put a strict definition, especially with the actual definition when you look it up is just high tech, low life, and you're like, what does that mean? Stuff.
If it's even that specific.
Yeah.
It means a cyber deck that's sealed up with duct tape, right? Like there's an episode of X-Files, Kill Switch, that William Gibson wrote. And the opening scene, that guy's got this laptop, and it's all duct taped and stuff. And I remember looking at it and was like, that is so fucking cyberpunk. Like, it's just this brand new, it's this brand new laptop, but he's got, they had to wrap it in duct tape. And, the AI lives in an Airstream trailer.
Yeah.
It's that juxtaposition that always does it for me, right? It's the, it's like in Giant Mnemonic, it's the dolphin. Yeah. Cyber dolphin. It's weird.
Heroin addicted cyber dolphin.
Yeah, the cyber dolphin. I always think of the broken aesthetic too. Like I'm watching The Expanse season 2 right now, which is not cyber, but they often show like the broken screens of like the phones or the communication devices they're using. It's like a screen. It's not like a pristine screen and like stuff like that. Like like the technology is used. It is like it is a part of, is a tool, you know, that everyone is using, and different people use it different ways depending on like their access level and their class and those kinds of. So that's why I think the broken, it's like the William Gibson thing, you know, the future is here, it's just not
Evenly distributed.
Yeah, that I think of that a lot when I think cyber, like that concept of like, well, technology is here, but people are using really old technology and really new technology, and it's all mixed together.
Yeah.
So I feel like,
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, that feels like it might be a good note to end it for tonight. Like we've gone an hour and a half. Like yeah, that's a good Gibson quote. Nail my colours to the mast. And a bit of a discussion of post Cyberpunk. If anybody in chat has questions or things they'd like us to discuss in future streams, then you can send them to any of us via Twitter, or you can throw them in the chat right now. Let's go around, starting from the top right, so Kira, Phil, and Fraser, and then me, and give like where you can get hold of your stuff and like how you can contact you for whatever. Kira.
Oh yeah, so I'm Kira. You can find me on Twitter, probably the easiest. I'm at Kira Nanzi, so that's KIRANANSI. You know, there's links to like my Patreon. You can find me on Patreon, Kira Magrann, where I'm designing small experimental tabletop games. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way to find all the rest of my stuff too. I have a website that's like Kira Magrann. If you Google search me.
Cool.
That's the easiest way. So that's me. Thank you. Who is that?
Phil.
Me. You can find me. The easiest way to find me is on Twitter at DNAPhil, and then I do a bunch of other stuff for so Encoded Designs, Misdirected Mark Podcast, Pandas Talking Games, all those Known Stew and all that. But that periodically comes up in my Twitter feed. And for free on drive-thru, you can get Rocker Boys and Vending Machines. It's the Lasers and Feeling cyberpunk hack. So you can play an actual vending machine.
Yes.
With a katana.
The dream.
We just saw, okay, quick sidetrack. We just watched Paprika for the first time last night. And there is an animated vending machine. And my friend was like, oh, did you know there's a whole anime about a vending life? And now there's also a game. Weird vending machine trends.
I didn't know there was an anime, but I didn't know Paprika had one. But so you can find me at Fraser Simons pretty much everywhere. I'm mostly on G+, and on Twitter. I also have a Patreon, same thing, Fraser Simons. I'm doing Uncanny Echo, which is a small adventure starter type thing of PBTA games where mundane people experience the extraordinary things and have to deal with it. So think of like the X-Files, except Mulder and Scully don't show up. You're just dealing with some shit. And each episode builds a meta-narrative on top of it. So yeah, and that's $2 a month. And you can listen to the playtest for $1 as well. So that's me.
Cool. And I'm Hamish Cameron, Peregrine Kiwi on Twitter and Peregrine Kiwi on Twitch. You can, we'll put all of these details in the show notes. And this will be up on YouTube. And I believe that we are going to try and get the audio out so that Fraser can put it on his website as well. We'll post links to that and everywhere, and we'll all spread it around everywhere. So this has been the first, mostly successful, I guess, episode of what do we call it? Cybershock. My game, the name that I expected everybody to rebel against, but nobody did, because it's a corporate world, man. So you guys will have to all wave to the people, because they can't see me waving. Alright, bye-bye, everyone.
In the snow somewhere.
Just one final note, shout out to Drummer Boy. This is Dark Synth track by him. His details are now on the stream. You can find him at Drummer Boy and at Twitch TV Drummer Boy and on Spotify and Apple Music. Thanks for watching, everyone.
I'm hearing it now.
Yeah.
I realized that if I turn off the if I turn off the call, it will also turn off the music. So everybody is still hearing us talk here. This is after hours. I just turn up the music so you guys can jam to it because
My shit. I've got
this
that
track
shit already, yeah.
came to my mailbox about 2 hours ago and I'm digging it. Alright, I'm killing the stream people. Listen to the track next time.